We can learn a lot from the Great Depression, from Grandma. I love things from the early 1900s to the 1950s. Obviously, I've got one of those rotary dial phones. That's what my daughter plays with, which I think is a better alternative to just the ones you can buy, the plastic ones from Walmart. So I wanted to share with you some tips and thoughts and just kind of realities from that Great Depression era. I've done a lot of research and read several books on it to talk about how we can take those lessons and those tips to put in today's world to be more conscious about just our things and not wasting, as well as saving money. And if you wish you could sit down with your grandmother or great-grandmother and talk about the olden days, as Peppa Pig says, make sure you click on that like button. One of the biggest ideas that I see from the Great Depression, which I absolutely don't see here now in 2022 or before, is being a part of a community. And I really hope that this comes back. But during that time, being a part of a community was vital for them, because sharing things, passing things along, it's just what they did. When they didn't need something any longer, they would pass it along to somebody else who did, rather than bagging it up and dropping it off at the Goodwill site. Well, at that time, that's just what there wasn't that around, and they had neighbors and things that would gladly accept that. So for instance, how we can translate that in today's society is, if we got to know our neighbors, if we were a part of a community and we were okay with, getting to know people better. I see too much now that people are pushing away. They are only really watching people or say they know people online, and that's really not the same. They don't have time to meet their neighbors because they're either too closed off or they just decide or are working too much. But one thing we could do if we came back together as a community to save money is, hand-me-downs. That's a big one. For my daughter, we aren't going to have any other children. We only have one. And when she outgrows something, we have a family that we give her things to. We automatically always think, who could benefit from this thing before we get rid of it? Or is it worth that? So when you can think about saving money and think about that time of community, if you could find somebody that you could swap those things. Maybe there was a mom who just had a bunch of maternity clothes. She's a brand new mom, and her neighbor gets pregnant. And you know what? Maternity clothes are hard to come by, number one, and expensive, number two. And she could use those for that time and even give them back if that other mother wanted them. But the same thing with the hand-me-downs. I loved getting hand-me-downs when I was younger. It was just, we didn't have a ton of money for a ton of new clothes. And I tell you what, my cousins could go and get some limited to clothes, which I would never have gotten. I was so excited about that stuff. So we can do it as adults now too, whenever I clean out my closet, I think about my niece, who is almost as tall as me now, and it's just crazy to think about. Or I think about my mom and who might benefit from my things. The other thing is just borrowing. So being able to not just go out and buy things. So if you need a ladder or a wheelbarrow, we have a wheelbarrow, and our neighbor has no need to buy a wheelbarrow. Trust me, he knows. Come over here, grab the wheelbarrow, because it's behind the fence, borrow it, bring it back. It's not a problem. That is something that we should really try to do more of. Same thing with our neighbor needed some Worcestershire sauce. I don't even know how to say that really quickly. Well, she texted me. I said, hey, my husband ran it right over to her. And I love stuff like that. If we could do more of that. And even in hard times, if you have a neighbor going through a hard time, coming together for that neighbor, preparing meals for the new mom, preparing meals for the family that has a close family member in the hospital, going over and picking up somebody's package off the front door and putting it in the garage for them or on the back porch so that nobody snatches it. These small little things, just we have got to hold on to it for this next generation. We cannot let them forget that. So now we're going to get into some more practical everyday tips. So adding fillers to your food. Now that's not, the artificial fillers and crap that they put in the stuff that's in the middle of the grocery store that's really bad for you. I'm talking about when you're making a meatloaf, you add either oats, or you can add, nowadays you can add the instant potato powder, or adding beans to it to make it go further. Especially right now, gosh, grocery prices, everything is going through the roof. I'm sorry, but for those of you that say inflation is actually not happening, no. I don't see people's paychecks rising as much as inflation is happening right now. I see the prices. I'm out there every day. Adding fillers, it's not going to cause harm because it's going to stretch that food further, and you can still get some nutrition out of adding beans to something or adding oats. So for instance, with a soup, I will take a soup, like a chili, and I will add cornmeal, like the little Jiffy Mix cornmeal. And what it does, just a little bit, like probably half a cup to a big crock pot. And I'll do it during the time it's cooking, or stewing, or whatever a crock pot does. And what it does is it thickens it up so that when you're eating it, you don't need as much of it. You don't eat as much of it. It's not too watered down, but it makes it more substantial. So think about foods that you could add those beans to, add those oats to, add that maybe the instant potato to plump them up in not the way we certainly think about things now, being plumped up with artificial things, right? Okay, during the Great Depression and even past then, if people had things, they used them until they broke or were completely worn out. They didn't use them only until they were out of style or they no longer wanted that style. So today, what you'll see is a lot of just turnover in people's stuff. Okay, so let's talk about, throw cushions, right? I will see people get new throw cushions for every season. Okay, if you love throw cushions, any of this stuff, it's certainly up to you. But it boggles my mind. Do you reuse the other cushions during the other season, or do you just get bored of them? Same thing with, couches or comforters or, those types of things. What I recommend is buying in a style that's a classic style that's not going to go out of style. That way you can use something until it's worn out, or until it's broken. Buying things that, if you get a new couch every few years, if you get a new dining table every few years, just because, you know what? I'm just tired of that style. It doesn't fit me anymore. I was into the farmhouse vibe, but now I'm not anymore. That is not something that they did back in the Great Depression. And if you do that now, and maybe you just resell your other stuff, again, we are all our own people, so don't take offense to this, please. But what I'm saying is, to save money and to be more conscious, think about it ahead of time. Think about buying the quality, not just the quantity. Buying something in a classic style, and then decorating with style, with things that are, maybe throw blanket, or different, little tchotchkes, or, shelving items that will change up the look of something. Back before there were televisions in everyone's house, before there were cell phones in everybody's hand, before there was internet all around the world, there was what was called basic entertainment. People entertained themselves without having to have an electronic in their face, without having to go to a sports game and spend a bunch of money, without having to go out to the movies every week, without having to go to a restaurant every other Friday. And basic entertainment was just what they did, and they loved it. And what is that today? That's card games. That's going for a walk with your family. That's turning on the radio in your house and dancing around, having a dance party. We can take basic entertainment and expand it to doing a movie night at home, going and find like a seek and find, or doing a scavenger hunt outside. There are so many things that we can do that we haven't really thought of. We think that, and when I say we, it's not everybody, obviously, but people think that they have to be going all the time. They've constantly got to be driving somewhere, doing something. Their kids are in 6 activities. They always have to have plans on a Friday or a Saturday. You don't. There are ways that you can find comfort and fun and enjoyment in basic entertainment. And oftentimes when it's something that's more like a card game or a board game, you'll find that you make better connections. And this is obviously where you can also get better connected within your community. You know, invite friends over for a game night. Mend it and maintain it. Back during those times, everybody mended something if it was broken, not working properly, and they maintained their things so that they lasted longer. They made sure that they took care of their items. They didn't misuse them and have to go out and buy something new. They knew if they bought something, it needed to last. With mending, they had those skills of sewing, hand sewing something up, putting a patch on something, and they weren't worried if you saw a patch on their clothes. You know, basic mending skills can really help even now, and maintaining especially. You know, unfortunately, things are now made to where it's called planned obsolescence, where they only last a certain amount of time. But if we can still try to maintain our things, for instance, computers, if I'm not mistaken, if you leave them plugged up all the time, charging, then that actually wears down the battery. You shouldn't leave them plugged up all the time. So things like that you can learn that are going to extend the life of the item that you purchased. Cooking at home, that's just what they did. There weren't really restaurants that you could go out to during that time in certain areas, especially rural areas. Beans were a great source of protein that they used, and because meat was a lot more expensive and harder to come by, so again, they used those beans in soups and were able to still get the protein, and maybe had meat as a small side item and use those fillers to help extend it further. You can mix beans with some yummy vegetables, and that is actually a really easy thing to save. Beans and vegetables really do save well. They're easily freezed or just left over during the week, and don't taste bad reheated. So cooking at home though, learning, you know, basic skills if you don't know them. Looking at some simple recipes, I'm sure you can Google like Depression era recipes, and you can find some really interesting things like water pie. Just Google it, look it up. I'm still interested in wondering if I should make that. But you can find some, you know, healthy recipes that have those beans and the vegetables that are going to stretch your grocery budget. But eating out, while I love eating out, don't get me wrong, I like going to a good restaurant and having a good meal, but it is so expensive. It used to be, I think, 3 to 5 times what you could make if you had the food, if you made the food at home. I think it's more than that now, way more. So looking at some recipes that are easy, that you could put on a regular family favorites meal or family favorites list, doing meal planning is a great way to take an idea from what they just had to do back during that time and bring it into today. Use every drop. This is something that they didn't just throw away food or things that they may have had. They used every drop. They turned over the bottle, they cut the bottle open, they scraped out the bottom of the dish. They ate everything. They reused the scraps from vegetables cutting. They used bones from meat they ate to make bone broth for a soup. They reused every drop of everything. So today I can tell you to do this with, you know, the food that you have. If you have fruit, couldn't think of the word, that's about to go over, you know, put it in a smoothie or put it in the freezer. Same thing with vegetables, maybe make a vegetable stock out of it. Or with things like face creams, face lotions, shampoo, conditioners. It irritates me to no end because I think honestly that they make some of these bottles a certain way now that the pump only brings out a certain amount of it, because I can have a bottle of lotion and the pump will stop pumping. I mean, it won't be able to get it anymore, and there'll still be this much of it at the bottom. Nope, I'm not throwing it away. I would turn that bottle over and I do this, and I get every drop out of it, or I cut it open. I have a special, what do you call that? You know, it's not scissors. It's the box cutter thing that I will open things up and use every drop. And this last one is kind of an overall arching theme from there that we really should put at the front of our brain when we're going to purchase something. And that is determining whether something is a need or a want. Back during that time, the majority of people, again, in rural areas or all over, even in cities, there weren't really wants. They really didn't get all of what they needed. It's really the stories, the pictures, if you just read the books on the Great Depression, it's really heartbreaking. But especially now to think that we are so ingrained to go, oh, I can just go buy that on Amazon. You know, it takes 2 seconds and it's here. We take that for granted. That our parents' generations and our grandparents' generations didn't. And if you're interested, I grew up a lot of this, and people don't believe me sometimes, but no, my mom and dad were born in the 50s, and their parents were born from, I think 1911 was the first one to 1930. So yes, my parents had, their parents had them when they were older, and my parents had me when they were a little bit older. So yes, I have grandparents who were born in, or I had grandparents, geez, can I talk today? Born in 1911, who, my grandpa was an adult during the Great Depression, had kids during the Great Depression. So I was able to really understand a lot of this, and I grew up with a lot of this frugal knowledge, you know, growing up, and I didn't really appreciate it or understand it, and I really kind of resented it for a little while, until I did more research and I did more learning into it. But really understanding the need versus the want, and seeing the people who had nothing, who had not even what they needed, really puts things into perspective. And, you know, you can think about that, hopefully, you know, just take it into your life when you're going to buy something and say, you know, if I really want it, sure, of course, I still buy wants. Absolutely. I buy things though, consciously. I do my research. I make sure that I'm going to use it, that I'm going to get multiple uses out of it, that it's a good price, etc. I have plenty of videos on how to do that, shop the best, and make the most when you're doing shopping, especially online shopping. But determining a need versus a want, especially if you're in a situation where it's very financially kind of dire or unstable, and you're really trying to make moves towards financial independence, paying off debt, saving for a mortgage, etc. That is one of the things that can really save you a lot of money. Please tell me down below, is there something that you learned from your mother, dad, grandmother, grandfather, great-grandparent from that time that it really stuck with you? Tell me your story down below in the comments. I would love to read it. If you enjoyed this video, make sure you give it a thumbs up, and don't forget to subscribe to my channel. I would love to have you back for more videos.